This is the Coconut Grove Real Estate Report covering us from June up until December for 2019. Let's get into this. So, as with all our reports, what we're doing here is we're covering the reports with three important pieces of information. The first is detailing the numbers, the stats, what's actually happened, and we're going to be detailing it around a lot of the information that you get from our neighborhood economic health score. The second part is we're going to be showing you the actual product that's moved in the last 6 months. And then finally, we're going to be looking at the demographic behavior, because the behavior is what drives the market. Confidence makes a market go up or down, not necessarily just the numbers. And that is very, very key, because our observations are all important to help you make better decisions. So let's start with a $0 to $1 million. So Coconut Grove, $0 to $1 million. We're standing right now in slightly what would be considered, I guess, close to mid-Grove. It's not quite where the townhouses are, but it is indeed where you get a number of these smaller homes under $1 million. Very different to Coral Gables. I think it's important to understand the perspectives between one neighborhood to another. Most of the homes in the Grove under $1 million, you're dealing with bigger lots than you might see in the Gables. Now, what does that mean? It actually means that the houses will not be as good because a lot of the value is in the land. We saw 53 sales in the last 6 months, and within those sales, we've seen dollar per square foot between $350 and $600. If you're at $600, you're in a really good home, but always through the process, we're finding that the size of these lots, being relatively generous, 7, 8, 9, 10,000, you're looking at small homes. You're looking at homes of, 1,200, 1,300, 1,400, maybe 1,500 square feet. You don't get a lot of stuff that's, 2,000, 2,500 square feet that you might see in the Gables. But ultimately, you do get slightly larger lots. Now, the Grove is not a big area. The truth is, it's not a huge parcel of land. You have the North Grove, which is obviously the closest to Brickell, which is sometimes more expensive. You have Mid-Grove, which for the most part is townhomes. And then you have the South Grove, which again is houses that verge onto Coral Gables, a little bit more further south. Now, commutable distance to places like Brickell obviously really does vary from North to South Grove, because you've got the commuter time in the morning when kids go to school. Remember, Coconut Grove is very, very strong with single families who have kids at the local private schools. So let's get into some of the stats on the neighborhood economic health score. So the score in Coconut Grove is 84 out of 100. It's actually very good. I say it's very good. It's not as good as Coral Gables, which is at 92, but 84 is still particularly healthy. And what you'll notice is that the months of inventory is 5.7, balance is 9. So you're definitely dealing with more demand than you have supply, which is obviously going to continue to put prices up. As I always say, babies are born into hospitals every single day, and what we'll find is that those families who have newborns are looking to move into these areas, and under $1 million is the atypical kind of price point that they're looking at. Now, with 5.7 months of inventory, a score of 84, on top of that, you've got 145 days on the market. Now, if you typically get into contract and then you have 45 days to close, you're dealing in a situation where you're getting product into contract within 3 months or maybe just over 3 months of being on the market. So really not very terrible at all. What are we achieving? 92.5% of asking price is what we're achieving at this price point. Again, comparing it to the Gables, it's not quite as good. Gables is at 95, but 92.5 is still a very, very good number to achieve. As with our neighborhood economic health score, you'll also see that we give you an average dollar per square foot. So as I said, the range is between $350 and $600. That's too broad for you to really get some good advice as a seller. But the blend average is about $426. I will tell you that a really well done home, if you have it in the Grove on a fair size lot, you're going to be pushing $550, $600 a square foot if it's really exceptional. A lot of the times you're going to be somewhere around the 500 range. If you are looking for a nicely done home and you're a buyer and you're trying to afford a home under $1 million and you want it well finished and you want more than 1,800 square feet, you really got to do the math. You're going to have to go over $1 million. So let's get into some of the sales that we've seen in this price point. Crystal Court, 2805 Crystal Court, 3840 La Playa, 328 Manor Place. And obviously there's a few more, and you can go through the blog and actually see these in more detail. These are good examples of some of the higher dollar per square foot achieved in the last 6 months in this neighborhood. Now, let's get into what we call the observations, the demographic observations of these clients. As I've said, the majority of the buyers buying in the Grove at this price point are entry-level families. They've just had a newborn baby, or they are coming in maybe potentially as empty nesters, but under $1 million is definitely the entry level into the market. A lot of the sales that we saw at this price point, the observation is that a good number of these are land deals. Now, given the fact that you're going to pay somewhere between $70 to $90 a square foot in the Grove, what we find is that some of the lots that sell, you can actually do more with them than you can in places like the Gables. Why? Well, simply put, zoning laws are more liberal. You can actually build up to 80% on the lot in the Grove. I know those laws are changing, but still you can build a much bigger home in Coconut Grove than you can in Coral Gables. That's one side of the coin. On the other side, you get the houses that obviously, as I said, were a little bit smaller on good-sized lots. But again, the finish, you cannot expect to get a great finished home, for the most part, under $1 million. You're going to have to get into the 1 to 2 range at least. The Grove is not a big area. There's not a huge amount of options. Looking at the different areas, we see 3 areas of cluster where most of the sales happened. We saw a number of sales around the Crystal Court area, talking west of Bayshore. We're talking about a cluster of sales that happened around Douglas, which is obviously in the South Grove. And we saw a cluster of sales happen around here, which is verging on that mid-Grove area. So next, we're going to talk about the 1 to 2 million range. So now we get into the 1 to 2 million range in Coconut Grove, and actually now we're in the South Grove, and this is typically where you're going to see most of the home sales, between 1 to 2 million range. Right now we're on a street called Battersea. This is a house that I sold 4 homes on in the last year and a bit. One to my left and one to my right. This one sold for just over 1.9. This one on the right sold for around just $2 million. So this is giving you an idea on the high end of that 1 to 2 million range. Obviously, it's very different once you get around 2 than you do really get around 1. But 2 is a big threshold point. A lot of my clients will talk about the 2 million, I need a $2 million home. So I think this is quite relevant to talk about that. Quite simply, this neighborhood does still perform pretty well. Let's go through some of the statistics. So on our neighborhood economic health score, this neighborhood scores 80 out of 100. It's pretty decent. It's Gables is a little stronger at 86, but 80 is still pretty solid. It has around 10 months of inventory. Again, 9 is balanced. So it's faring up pretty well. Now, it's important to recognize that home sales in this neighborhood are somewhere between 350 and 600. Now, clearly, that's a pretty broad range. 350, you're looking at a kind of a tear down, a complete gut job. 600, you're talking about the best of the best brand new construction, good sized lot. But the reality is the average is 429. That's probably a good way to kind of measure it. And I would say, much like the Gables, between 430 and 500 is kind of a range that you might be looking at. Now, in the Grove, it goes up usually probably a little bit more because there isn't as much product as there is in other neighborhoods like Coral Gables, which is obviously much, much bigger. But what you will notice, and there's a big difference here, is that the lots tend to be smaller at this level than they do in the neighboring Coral Gables market. What we found, though, is that the majority, like I said, the product is really in that 1 to 2 range, is going to be more focused when it's closer to 2 in the South Grove. We have seen some sales, and let's get into those sales now with specific sales that have occurred this year in the last 6 months in Coconut Grove. So some examples of some sales, 2801 Seminole. Now again, we're talking some of the land deals that happened just under $2 million. Bearing in mind, we don't have a lot of big lots. 20,000 would be considered very, very sizable for Coconut Grove. That was one of the examples. Another sale, St. Gaudens, 3685. Another 3550 Avocado and 3630 Avocado. Now, this is an example of some of those newer homes that are getting built. There's not a lot of new product under $2 million. Just like the Gables, if you're trying to get a new home under $2 million, don't hang your hat out there because you're going to find it really, really hard to find. If you do, and it does exist, you're dealing with smaller lots. So if you're okay with a 7,000 square foot lot, 6,500 square foot lot, maybe 8 if you're very lucky and you want new, and you're okay with that, then yes, it's possible to find that in the Grove, but it's not as likely as you will when you get into a product that's 2 to 2.5. We seem to have had a lot of construction in the last 6 months, or say the last couple of years, and so we're finding a lot of those opportunities are kind of drying up now. The point of where we were from 6 months before, I would say the market's pretty stable. A lot of people are always asking me, how much is the market moving up or down? Honestly, it's probably floating around somewhere in the same area. As you get over to, it starts to soften a bit. My observations, it's families, it's relocations. Those are the people who are buying in this market. And the reason why we do so much business is because we produce things like the relocation guide, which is a very important go-to guide for anybody who might be a tax refugee coming from New York or Connecticut or LA or any of those other high-tax states. They're moving because of the best schools. They're moving for this green space, gardens, barking dogs. You know, this is all part of the lifestyle down here. It's very important to recognize that's what you will get in Coconut Grove. Let's give you some more of the statistics that we pull from our neighborhood economic health score. The days on the market, 213. Now, it kind of sounds like the numbers are creeping up here in terms of how long it takes to sell. And you're right, it is. 213 probably gives us a sense that it's taking 175 days for a product to get into contract. What does that mean? 5 months, 6 months. If you have, and particularly as you push into the price point closer to $2 million, unless you're well priced, you know, product is staying on the market a little bit longer. And probably the reason we've seen that is because a lot of the homes under $2 million, there's not that many really well finished brand new homes out there. Buyers are more sensitive. What I found, and this is again a demographic observation, I found people have been a little bit more hesitant. It has to have the right value, but if it's really well done, it moves. Battersea was a good example. We gave it a fresh new kitchen. As soon as that happened, we got into contract very, very quickly. Let's discuss the 2 to 3 million range. So now we get into the 2 to 3 million range in Coconut Grove. Again, it's not a big market. There were 17 sales in the last 6 months in Coconut Grove. And if you look how many sales that is compared to other neighborhoods, it's not as many because it's not as big. There's much fewer of those homes. The majority of the product sits between 0 to 1 million and 1 to 2. But what we did see is houses like what we have on the left, which is 1661 Micanopy. This is a house in the North Grove, which sold for 2.45. The actual score of this neighborhood, not as good as the 0 to 1 or the 1 to 2. In fact, it drops all the way down to a credit score of 65. 65 on our neighborhood economic health score, which is a blended combination of some other statistics, which obviously we're going to go through. So the dollar per square foot selling was between 406 and 770 for a dry lot. And obviously that's a little twisted, probably because we're dealing with some bigger lots. A lot of the sales were in the North Grove. Now, we saw a couple of waterfront sales. That's really not so typical. There's not as much water that you can get in that price point. Actually, that happened to be on Bayshore Lane. But the dry lot homes are between, like I said, between 400 and 760. Blended average is actually $559 per square foot. So we have 22.4 months of inventory. We have average days on the market at 192. Again, this is actually a large number of days on the market for the product, but it's actually a little bit less than the price before at the 1 to 2, simply because there's not as much product. But people are more hesitant in that 2 to 3 range, and I'll tell you why. Because if you go into the Gables, if you go into Ponce Davis and High Pines, you can get bigger lots, you can get more options for your money. But the majority of sales that we did see were in the North Grove, and that's really simple. It's because you have Immathila, Seminole, Nocatee, and Espanola. These are streets where you get bigger lots, 20,000 square foot lots. For the most part in the Grove, we don't get these big lots. We usually get 8 to 10, maybe sometimes 12 if we're lucky. Those are the only streets that will see those bigger lots, which allow us to see those bigger numbers. Now, I had a couple of big sales in the 2 to 3 range in the last 6 months. I had 2177 Tigertail, and I also had 2600 Natoma, which also sold. That one actually sold for 2.25, and the other one sold for 2.5. So with days on the market, it's taking longer to move those homes. But here's the thing about Coconut Grove, and this is what we call the social observations, the demographic studies, and what we're finding with our buyers. The Grove is home to some of the best private schools. You have in Coconut Grove, you have St. Stephen's, you have Carrollton, and you have Ransom. And on your doorstep, you have schools like St. Thomas and Riviera. And then obviously a little bit further south, you have schools like Gulliver. Now, what you'll actually find in the Grove neighborhood is it's the closest primary neighborhood to Brickell. So if you work in Brickell, often we'll find families and clients will want actually to buy in the Grove rather than to buy more south. But the limited available land means obviously it's a little bit more challenging. The other study, again, part of the relocation, there was an article that came out a few years ago called From Birkenstocks to Billionaires. And there we're talking about the lifestyle in Coconut Grove. Coconut Grove is about a lifestyle. And it's very important to understand that for aside from the kind of the bohemian lifestyle that it has and the kind of the artsy vibe, beats the heart of a real legitimate primary market neighborhood. And finally, we're going to talk about the 3 to 5 million range. This is going to be short and sweet because let's face it, guys, there aren't that many $3 to $5 million homes in Coconut Grove. If you want a $3 to $5 million home, watch my Coral Gables report, you'll see a lot more product. Now, there were 4 sales in the last 6 months in Coconut Grove in the 3 to 5 range. And if that is your focus, you want to look at some of those gated communities that we have in the Grove. We have areas like Devon Court, the Moorings, Camp Biscayne. These are some of the most key and most important neighborhoods that we have that are gated within this community. Again, you might want to go online and look at our gated communities of Coconut Grove. There is actually a specific page for that. But getting into the details of the sales, with 4 sales, we've actually got one of those was waterfront. An average dollar per square foot is $608 a square foot. It's actually lower than what we see in Coral Gables. The economic health score, interestingly, goes up now, and it really goes up to 88. And the reason it goes up to 88 is because there's fewer product on the market. We have statistically 12 months of inventory and 171 days on the market. So if you look at the study, product goes up, product goes down. Again, not a lot of choice. It's important, 93.5% of the asking price is what we've achieved. And some of the key sales you can see up on the screen. Again, read the blog, read the article to see all the sales and everything that's gone on with this price point and all the others. Fundamentally, the 3 to 5 range, let's focus on some of the stuff that's going to be on the water. And it's interesting to make a comment on what's going to happen next, because I think everybody wants to know. In the future, we're expecting to see some really grand homes being built at the very high end in Coconut Grove. There's a few areas, a few gated communities where they will build these exceptional $1,000 square foot plus homes that we'll see. Why the Grove has a villagey feel. It's a very unique personality to any other area. And if you've driven through and you've seen the development of Cocoa Walk and you see the growth of condos like Park Grove, the Mr. C's, and all these kind of high-end living environments that we typically didn't have because the Grove has always been more of a relaxed bohemian kind of artsy environment, it's now gaining that very high caliber of product that we previously don't have. There's a few homes that are directly on the water, peninsula front as we call it. Those ones, again, if they do come up, they come up rarely and they reach extremely high dollar per square foot. So as always, call me, email me, text me, speak through WhatsApp, and we look forward to helping you and seeing you soon. Thank you.